And we haven't had Bill Burge on this program yet, but some of his stories about the University Ensemble and the role that that organization played in getting black students here, I think is really powerful. And I don't know if you and I talked. I remember the very first time I heard that University Ensemble, my shivers down my back. They were so moving and so talented.
Yeah, you know, yes, they were. And of course, you know, one of the young men that got that started, and I don't guess he's so young anymore. You know, he's kind of like us. You know, Eric Abercrombie is on the faculty at the University of Cincinnati, and that was and is a fine organization. And I've told a number of people that one of the things I would like to do during my time on the job here, or back on the job here, is to revitalize that organization back to the prominence that it once had.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit about your memories, recollections of President Bob Martin. You told some of us recently that he was the most politically astute person you'd ever met. Can you think of a couple of examples of that?
Well, you know, the people talk about the ability to see around a corner, and you know, when you think back about Bob Martin, he could see around blocks. Life was a chess game to Dr. Martin, and it was fascinating to hear him with some precision predict what the next step would be that someone else would take. But I guess one of the best examples of political astuteness, Eastern during the Martin years was a very agile institution and was quick to find niches. And nursing education was one of those, but law enforcement education was probably the prime example of that. And no one was really interested in that. No one else in the state was really interested in that when Eastern first became involved with it. Then along came the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration that started putting a lot of money into law enforcement education around the country, and suddenly what Bob Martin and others here had begun kind of as a risk venture became very attractive. So there was a study that someone else paid to have done that suggested that perhaps law enforcement education ought to be centered somewhere else in Kentucky rather than at Eastern. So Dr. Martin, on this, you know, just right across this ridge where we're sitting now, it was just all bare at the time, farmland, brought a tractor trailer out, put red, white, and blue bunting all the way around it, made kind of a speaker's platform out of it, and then brought then Governor Wendell Ford to the Eastern campus to break ground for what is now the Henry Stratton Building, which was the first permanent home for the EKU, what was then College of Law Enforcement, now College of Justice and Safety. So in that one move, by getting the governor here to participate in the groundbreaking, he effectively checkmated those who wanted to lure it to attract that program away from here.
That's interesting. You mentioned Wendell Ford. What year was that? Do you remember?
That was sometime in the early 70s.
Yeah, because one of the early memories I had at Eastern is during the gubernatorial primary of 1971, when Ford was running against Burt Combs. I was officed in the Burt Combs building, which was kind of interesting. But we all went over to the post office, and there was a flyer in there urging us to vote for Burt Combs. Of course, everybody knew that Bob Martin and Burt Combs were very close. But then Wendell Ford won the election. Well, obviously, Bob Martin didn't let that hinder him in terms of cultivating a governor.
You know, Dr. Martin took the position. You know, we only have one governor.
Yeah.
And he was always, so whether it was his close friend Burt Combs, Combs's ally Ned Breathitt, you know, the first Republican governor in a long time, Louis Nunn. And, you know, I don't guess there's any question that, you know, Bob Martin would not have been a supporter of Louis Nunn going into that election. But they developed a very fine working relationship. And I remember Dr. Martin saying near the end of the Nunn administration that Nunn had been one of the best governors in his experience for higher education in the Commonwealth.
And people would still say that, I think, about Governor Nunn. Well, we've sort of covered this, but on that panel that you and I were on a couple of months ago, 2 or 3 longtime Eastern faculty members agreed with you that Bob Martin was the right president for EKU at the time. Why was that the case?
That was when enrollments all over the country were really starting to take off. In fact, but Eastern's growth, and really the growth of some other institutions in Kentucky, probably outstripped the national trends, the national trends some. Dr. Martin was really a consummate financial expert. He was the one who really, as Commissioner of Finance, laid the groundwork for the Consolidated Educational Buildings bond systems and for the housing and dining bond systems that allowed these campuses in Kentucky to both build the academic and service buildings that they needed to house academic programs and the residence halls that they needed to house the students at the time. And he just knew how to get things done in terms of getting bonds issued, working with architects, the building, and certainly Bob Martin wasn't a one-man show, but that was another one of his great abilities, was to hire bright people. He brought a lot of these folks that we look at now, who were the great faculty pillars of this institution, were folks that Bob Martin interviewed and hired, because Paul, I'm sure you remember as well as I do, at that particular time, there wasn't a professional staff member or faculty member hired on this campus that didn't undergo a personal interview with Bob Martin, and they were not perfunctory interviews.
No, most anybody can tell you what went on in the interview too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've already heard some stories about that. We should mention at this point John Rowlett, who was one of the people that helped fill some of those niches.
Yes, and John was deeply involved in the development of the nursing programs on this campus, occupational therapy, our College of Law Enforcement, helping bring to this campus and build the wonderful working relationship that we have with the Department of Justice's Department of Criminal Justice Training, which is housed here and has I guess a symbiotic relationship would be the best way to describe it with our College of Justice and Safety. John probably did as much as any one person to make Eastern competitive in the federal grant and contract market too. I know he, for many years on campus, he taught a class for young faculty and staff members on grant writing, and a lot of successful grant writers came out of those courses.
Yeah, yeah.